Hello, everyone, and thank you for watching our Candidate Spotlight series. Today, we will be talking to Commissioner Bradshaw of District 4, who is running for DeKalb County CEO. Commissioner Bradshaw, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Great. Well, let us, if you don't mind, jump right in and talk about
Sure.
some of the issues that are important to our constituents that the Belvedere Civic Club serves. And we are asking the same questions of all the candidates so that everyone can respond in kind. And one of the things we wanted to know is what accomplishments in your past as an office holder qualifies you to lead one of the largest and most diverse counties in Georgia?
Okay, that's a great question. Thank you so much. I have served on the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners for now coming up on 7.5 years. Over the course of that time, I've been the chairman of three different committees. I was chairman of the County Operations Committee. I have been chairman of the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. And I'm currently chairman of the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee. And as many folks know, DeKalb County's budget is not inconsequential. It is a little over $1.6 billion on an annual basis. And in addition to all of that, I was presiding officer of the board for 2 years. I was elected unanimously by my peers both times, which I regard as a significant accomplishment in that they placed their trust and their confidence in my leadership for 2 consecutive years. And just as a side note, the presiding officer is limited to serve no more than 2 consecutive terms. And I don't mind telling you that after 2 years in that role, I was certainly ready to relinquish that title and that responsibility. But I happened to be presiding officer during what can be argued as two of the most challenging years in DeKalb County's history, which were the years of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I became presiding officer in January of 2020. As we all know, we went into COVID mode in March of 2020. And that transition from a normal operating environment to a COVID environment was challenging to say the least in terms of how we structured our meetings and how citizen engagement occurred. But we were able to get it done. And during my tenure, we accomplished some pretty significant things, including getting the county through the redistricting process, which was no small feat. And all of that was done in a pandemic environment. So I'm extremely proud of my time in office. Uh, I think I've demonstrated the temperament, the judgment, and the humility to discharge the duties of CEO. And as a leadership quality, I put a huge emphasis on the word humility. Uh, I feel like I have certain skills and certain experiences that I bring to the table, but I've lived long enough and experienced enough to know that I don't know everything. I'm not the fountain of all knowledge and all virtue. I know that. So I will surround myself with smart, talented, dedicated people who can help me govern this big county.
Well, when we're talking about challenges that DeKalb has faced, like COVID, in your opinion, what's the largest problem facing DeKalb County right now, and why is it the largest problem, and what would you do to solve it?
Yeah, so the first responsibility of any government is the safety of its citizens, and public safety will be my number one priority. We have a situation, particularly in our police department right now, where candidly speaking, we don't have enough police officers. And that's a byproduct of a number of things, including the simple fact that being a police officer is difficult. It is a very, very difficult job under normal circumstances. In the last several years have been abnormal circumstances. So we have to address the public safety functions. So my approach to that is what I call a full spectrum approach. So the spectrum being the enforcement side and the prevention side. So on the enforcement side, simply stated, I'm going to have to do something pretty dramatic on the compensation and benefits front, both compensation and benefits, to number one, stop the loss of our officers, and number two, to serve as an attractive point for attracting officers. So it'll be both recruitment and retention. We have to do that. Right now, we're in an arms race with other jurisdictions. We train police officers in our police academy for the training period. They serve with us for 2 or 3 years, and then they go off to other jurisdictions because the pay and benefits are better and the workload is less. So that's an enticing combination. So I'm going to have to do something very dramatic on the compensation and benefits front. If we can get our numbers back up, then our police officers, our precincts will be fully manned, fully staffed, and we can do other things on that front, other things that we want our police to be engaged in, like community policing and, activities like the Police Athletic League. Right now, because of the state of the staffing levels in our precincts, it's all they can do to just answer calls. So we want to be able to do more than that. And over time, that'll help build the trust and the relationship between the community and the police force that is there to protect the community. So that's the enforcement side. On the prevention side, it'll be a focus on our youth. We want to capture people while they're young, point them in alternative good directions while they're young, and that'll be the emphasis. So I plan to greatly enhance two programs that I'm currently decisively engaged in. One is called Rise Up. It is a program that is targeted at middle school boys of color. It is a derivative of President Obama's My Brother's Keeper program. I've been solely funding it out of my office as a commissioner for the last several years, and it provides these young boys an intense program of leadership skills, the mentoring that they need, life skills. It's run by our Human Services Department Youth Division, and it takes place over the summer, over several weeks, where the boys are actually on the Morehouse University campus. So there's a great partnership between DeKalb County and Morehouse University. And I know that the program is working because last year, in the last cohort, we had 53 boys enrolled, and there were another 50 on the wait list. And simply because, I don't have the capacity as just a commissioner to fund that to that level. But the demand is there. So that is a program I'm going to dramatically expand to CEO. And I've talked to some of the parents who put their sons through that program. They love it. In fact, I was talking to a mom the other day whose older son has gone through the program, and she's already decided that she's going to send her younger son through the program too. So that program I intend to greatly enhance. The other engagement that I'm really proud of is with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Metro Atlanta. So they have a great model, a great construct for getting bigs that they call the adults assigned to littles, which are the boys, to provide them the consistency of an adult male in their lives. And the consistency is very, very important. People can swoop in and speak to a crowd and drop some pearls of wisdom, and then you swoop out. But the beauty of the Big Brothers Big Sisters program is the consistency. So they require bigs to commit to at least 1 year. And a lot of the engagements between the bigs and littles last for multiple years. And that is a very, very critical component. And just as an example, Alexandra, of what I'm talking about, with regard to the girls, there are more women that have signed up to be bigs than there are girls in need of mentorship. With the boys, it is 180 degrees the opposite. There are more boys in search of mentors than there are men who have signed up to be mentors. So that is a program that I'm decisively engaged with. We started last year for my district of 50 Men to Mentors program, coupled with Big Brothers and Big Sisters. And that is an engagement that I will dramatically expand as CEO. If we can show our youth alternative good paths while they're young, they're less likely to start committing crimes, starting with petty crimes in their teenage years up and through their mid-late 20s. We can interdict earlier, we've got a better chance of getting them on the right path.
Well, let me talk to you about something that's very important to my community specifically. For a good long time, the Belvedere Civic Club has been trying to work hand in hand with code enforcement
Mm-hmm.
with blighted property that we
Mm-hmm.
see in and around our community. So, given the large number of like vacant, blighted properties in DeKalb County at large, what actions can be taken to address this? What can be done about blighted properties in general that DeKalb County owns that don't seem to be subject to the same code enforcement rules that, say, like a homeowner would face?
So if it's a property that DeKalb County owns, we should have a little more latitude and a little more flexibility in terms of the disposition of that property. With regard to, blighted properties that are owned by individuals, it gets a little more cumbersome and a little trickier than that. We have a community development department that is demolished a lot of abandoned properties over the years I've been in office. It's certainly not at the pace that we would want, but that has occurred. But there's an X factor in that process, which is the courts, because we can't just identify a property and decide this is an eyesore, so let's do something about it. It's got to be adjudicated through the magistrate court system, which, as I think you all know, that the CEO doesn't have control over the courts. Now, having said that, I know a lot of the judges in the various courts. I could see having sidebar conversations to kind of move that along, but I'd be very careful about, exceeding the limits of my authority as the chief executive officer of the county in terms of what a given judge does with regard to how they adjudicate specific, abatement and demolition cases. But the courts play a very critical role in that process. And it is a process. It's a slow, cumbersome process, but it is a process.
Well, let's talk about something near and dear to my own heart, but it is something
Mhm.
that many of our neighbors in our community have brought to our attention, which is the unfriendly, user unfriendly nature of the DeKalb County website. Um, that there doesn't seem to be a way to get in contact with someone or find a centralized information warehouse about a specific topic or event or program, initiative, whatever. If you're looking for specific information, it can be very difficult to find it. What would you do to address information dissemination and county
Yep.
accountability?
Yeah. So that is a very good point that you raise. So I'm going to be very candid with you. Our customer service delivery in DeKalb County is horrible. It is not good. Uh, it's it's just not good. So and I'll give you a prime example of something that happened very recently. So I got a call within the last week or so from a business owner, African American female owned business owner who was a subcontractor to one of the primes in DeKalb County, who called me at her wit's end because she can't get her uh, invoice paid. And what she shared with me is that, I mean, she runs a good business, but, at this point, the county owes her $270,000, which she can't float. We're supposed to pay our bills net 30. In this particular circumstance, it was well over 100 days, approaching 120, which is, completely unacceptable. So she asked what, if anything, I could do. So I got into it. I got the chief operating officer on the phone, explained the situation, expressed my displeasure with that situation. Long story short, within 3 days, the invoice got paid. The check got cut to the prime, and hopefully the individual who called me has been taken care of. And of course, I circled back and shared with her where we were. And that's all fine and dandy that it got resolved, but it's not fine and dandy because the process, it shouldn't have required a commissioner, making a specific call to the chief operating officer to get this specific situation resolved. We should be able to pay people who do business in DeKalb County in a timely manner. And that feeds the whole narrative that DeKalb is difficult to do business with. So what you mentioned specifically about the website is just part and parcel of the whole notion that DeKalb is unuser friendly. So what I'm going to have to do as CEO is drive nothing less than what I will call the cultural change in how we execute service delivery. So that starts at the top with me, requiring it, demanding it, but also training people properly in how to interface with the public. And that'll require a pretty significant investment on the training piece. Now, once folks have been trained, my expectations have been made clear, and I've populated the government with people who can help me execute, then it's up to me and everybody who reports to me to hold people accountable to doing that. There's an anecdotal metric that that'll become self-evident over time as we're executing this. So in my office currently, I have an individual who handles her sole job, aside from helping to manage my schedule, is dealing with constituent complaints. And I guarantee you, Alexandra, that anywhere from 80 to 90% of the calls I get in my office are from citizens who call the DeKalb County Department and failed to get satisfaction. Everything from I left a voicemail and never got my call returned, to whoever I was talking to on the phone was rude to me. They didn't seem to care about my issue, and it's unacceptable. So we're going to execute a cultural change and drive DeKalb to being more user friendly. Now, having said that, this needs, and I don't want to belabor this, but it's important for people to understand that driving cultural change is not easy. Culture is one of those, it sounds like something soft, but it's very, very critical into how organizations operate. So when I was teaching as a professor, adjunct professor, I used to teach a class on organizational culture and leadership. And the frame I describe for my students is this, right? A new leader comes in full of energy and vigor, ready to do all of these great and wonderful things. Sooner or later, that leader runs into resistance. Now, my term of art for that resistance is what I call the revenge of the bureaucracy. Okay. The bureaucracy's posture is, we survived the last 2 or 3 guys that look like you. We're going to survive you too. We'll be here after you're gone. And at that point, the leader has a decision to make. Do you push through that resistance, take the tough decisions that you need to take in order to push through that resistance? Or do you take the tack, you know what? I am only going to be here for a few years. I'll make a few changes at the margins. It's not worth the headaches and the wailing and moaning that's going to ensue if I try to drive cultural change. Over the course of my experience and various professional iterations of my life, most leaders choose the latter because it's the path of least resistance. I'm not wired that way. I'm not conditioned that way. I'm willing to be unpopular for a little while internally to drive through that, because this is what I think I know. In fact, I know. If you're able to push through that resistance, what you'll find is there's a army of people on the other side of that dying for the opportunity to do the right thing. They've just been conditioned over time to not make any waves, to keep your heads down, you don't, yeah, they'll hear from a supervisor. You don't have to worry about Steve Bradshaw. He's not your boss. I'm your boss. You need to worry about me and what I'm telling you. And that's the paradigm that has to be broken. And that's the paradigm that I'm going to break because the citizens of DeKalb County are paying for this government. They deserve good customer service. I'll harken it back and I'm belaboring, but you said it's important to you and in the folks in your community. So I want to just fill out the pieces of the puzzle on this. So what it distills to is we have to get good at doing the basics. We have to become very, very good at executing the basics. And I'm all for big plans and lofty visions and everything attended with that. But unless you're really good at doing the basics, doing all those other things becomes very difficult. And it takes me back to an experience that I had during my corporate sales days. And I'll give you the condensed version, but I had this huge client, the logistics client. These guys spent 17, $18 million a year with me. And my company was coming out with some new product offering, and my boss wanted me to go pitch it to the vice president of this company who was my client. So I go in and do my little sales pitch, and he sits there very patiently and lets me get all the way through it. And I said, "Well, Bob, tell me what you think." And he said, "Steve, I've got a suggestion for you." I thought he was going to critique the product offering or critique my sales pitch. And all he said to me is, "Why don't you just fill my current orders? Why don't you just show me you can do that?" And that has stuck with me since then. That it's easy to talk about big visions and doing great newfangled wonderful things, but what people want to know is that you can deliver the basics. Here at the local level, we're at the end of the day, we're in the service delivery business, and we have to prove to the citizens who are paying for this government that we're competent, more than competent. Competent should be the baseline, that we're very, very good at executing the basics. So that was a long-winded answer for which I apologize, but I wanted you to have the full scope of where I'm coming from on this front.
Once we now have the basics covered, let's talk a little bit larger because we'd like to know how your administration would work with state
Mm-hmm.
government to ensure that the needs and concerns of our community are being met by state legislation.
Yes, so I have good relationships with the members of the DeKalb delegation. I know almost every one of the state representatives. I know almost every one of the state senators. Obviously the nature and depth of the relationship will vary. There's a spectrum, but I feel like I have open lines of communication with our DeKalb delegation, and I will use those relationships as a conduit to state government. Now, where I feel like we're lacking is with the administration of the state, and some of that's political because DeKalb's a Democratic county. The state administration is Republican. Candidly, that's not going to be an impediment to me. Just as a editorial note, in the macro sense, I think hyperpartisanship is ruining this country. So we have to be able to talk to each other across, ideological or political divides because we're all ostensibly elected to attend to the needs of the citizens who elected us. So I'm confident in my ability to build those relationships. One of the reasons I love governing at this level is because our issue set in local government is not inherently partisan. All right. People just want their garbage picked up. People want their roads paved. Right. People want their interface with the government to be seamless. None of those have a partisan and inherently partisan tinge to them. So that's why I love governing at this level. And I feel like I will bring those sensibilities to my engagements with the leadership in the state of Georgia.
Well, okay. On a slightly more personal note, I'm given to understand that you have served in the military. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to join the military?
Yeah, so I started my professional life as a United States Army officer. I went into the military as a second lieutenant after graduating from college. I was formally trained as a tank commander. So I trained on M1A1 Abrams tanks and I actually served during the first Persian Gulf War in Saudi Arabia and Iraq. And, I was born into a military family. My father spent a career in the United States Navy. Uh, so it was sort of something that I was born into. I always figured that military service would be a part of my life at some point, which it was. And I'm very grateful for that experience. Some of my takeaways from serving in the military are number one is discipline. I consider myself to be a disciplined person. Number two is devotion to duty. And I will be devoted to the citizens of DeKalb County. And number three is self-sacrifice. A big part of leadership is self-sacrifice, and I will sacrifice for the citizens of DeKalb County. So I'm extraordinarily grateful for that experience. And just as a just small example of how I was conditioned as a young Army officer, I practice what I refer to as chow line leadership. So, chow is food in the military. So just imagine a scenario where you're out on a field exercise and you're lucky enough, fortunate enough to have a hot meal trucked out to you, as opposed to eating, meals out of the plastic pouch, otherwise known as MREs. So this is what my first company commander taught me over 30 years ago, and this stuck with me to this day. When the food truck shows up, the commander is not the first one in line. The commander is the last one in line. And we, as his lieutenants, went right before him. The soldiers came first. And that is something that has stuck with me to this day. On Tuesdays after our commission meetings, they have lunch brought up to the fifth floor. I can't remember a time when I ate before my staff did. It's just that's how I'm wired. That's how I've been conditioned. And it might strike some as a small thing, but it's a very, very big thing in terms of discharging the duties of a leadership function. The leader should be willing to put themselves last and put the people they're charged with leading first. So those are valuable lessons that I took from my military experience. And thank you for the question.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner Bradshaw, for joining us today and allowing your current constituents for District 4, as well as your potential constituents as CEO, to ask some questions of you. Thank you so much for your time.
Wow, we're done?
You're done.
Oh my goodness. Well, that was most enjoyable. Thank
It
you.
was. Thanks.